citizen here of Mississippi, and I am here along with others as citizens today to petition our legislature to pass net metering law. We have waited several years for this and hope this will be the year that will occur. And you've heard that net metering is simply an electricity policy that allows customers to be credited for the amount of net electricity that the customer's renewable energy system will provide in excess of what he uses as a customer as it's fed back into the utility grid. Now, all but 3 states in the United States now have net metering policies. And although there is a federal law that requires utilities to provide net metering when requested by a customer, that has not happened. In fact, it's been necessary that states enact legislation locally in order to enforce this and make it happen. So we are urging the legislature to take action this year and pass a net metering law. I'm interested in it because I would like to have solar in my own home, and as an engineer I would like to do projects for solar design for customers. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Jadeo Singh, an immigrant from Trinidad, who since his arrival in this country has risen to become the president and CEO of Alliance Electric and Construction in Laurel, Mississippi.
Thank you. I want to speak a little bit about energy. Everyone today is speaking about net metering laws, solar systems, and nobody seems to be going back to the root of it all. So to begin with, I'd like to explain to you a little bit about energy. Energy is the capacity to do work. No energy is equivalent to no work. Thus, the world's economy is 100% dependent on energy. It always has been, and it always will be so. The first law of thermodynamics tells us that neither capital nor labor nor technology can create energy. Instead, available energy must be spent to transform existing matter, example oil, or to divert an existing energy flow, for example wind or solar, into more available energy, or convert solar to electricity. There are no exceptions to the thermodynamic laws. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that energy is wasted at every step in the economic process. The engines that actually do work in our economy, for example diesel engines, waste more than 50% of the energy contained in their fuel. Energy resources must produce more energy than they consume. Otherwise, they are running at a loss and should be at this point considered inefficient. For example, about 735 joules of energy is required to lift 15 kilograms of oil at a depth of 5 meters, just to overcome gravity. And the higher the lift, greater the energy requirements. The most concentrated and most accessible oil is produced first. Thereafter, more and more energy is required to find and produce oil. That is, the deeper we drill for oil, the less efficient the oil becomes. Energy recovered from the oil at this point, the oil is no longer energy efficient. There's an enormous difference between net energy of the highly concentrated fossil fuel that power modern industry, and the dilute alternative energy will be forced to depend upon as fossil fuel resources become inefficient. A good example of this is seen with electric utilities, where an average of between 25% to 50% of the power generated is lost during transmission. The less efficient the energy generated becomes, electric utilities are now boasting of clean coal as a renewable and efficient substitute for oil. No so-called renewable energy system has the potential to generate more than a tiny fraction of the power now being generated by oil, except solar, wind, and hydrokinetics. With these energy sources, we do not need to transmit power over long distances and thereby avoid the large energy losses incurred presently by electric utilities, because these systems generate at the point of consumption. One example of this is with solar systems or hydrokinetics. We generate power on the location where we need to use it. The electric utilities generate power long distance away from our homes. When they transmit power to our homes, there's a lot of losses in energy during that transmission. Solar systems more or less takes care of that losses. We don't have it. Secondly, we need to start looking at our homes or facilities and try to make it more energy efficient. A lot of people may think, hey, my electricity bill for the month is $300, so I need a solar system to give me the amount of power I need to equate to that $300. That is not so. What we need to do is first deal with the inefficiencies in our homes and our commercial properties. One way of doing that is to start using low wattage bulbs, more efficient bulbs, take care of our windows, make sure we're weatherproof our properties even better than they are. And the third step, which a lot of companies are now starting to look at, is to start consuming electricity in DC voltage and not AC as we are accustomed to. Most appliances in our homes consume DC voltages. The electricity company supplies us with an AC voltage, which is then converted to DC and then we consume it. On our solar systems converts our electric power in a DC format. So we get power to DC, but then we go through the most inefficient transformation. We convert it back to AC, and then it goes to our appliances, and then we use it now in DC again. If we start converting homes and electric systems to all DC, we'll be able to use the power, consume the power in DC. A lot of appliances, light bulbs, everything is being manufactured in DC today. We can improve the efficiency of our buildings, our homes, by at least 60% by consuming energy in DC rather than AC. With these energy sources, we really do not need to transmit power over long distances and thereby avoid the large energy losses incurred presently by electric utilities, because these systems generate at the point of consumption and from truly renewable sources. Remember, industrialized civilization as we know it went from using coal for energy needs to oil, because oil is in many cases 5 times more efficient than coal. Shouldn't we now go to solar, wind, or hydrokinetics, which is as much as 10 times more efficient than oil? Shouldn't the state put measures in place to encourage the use of power generation from truly renewable energy sources by enacting legislation such as Senate Bill 2201, the HB 171 and HB 180 to make net metering mandatory? It is time that we as residents of Mississippi rally to encourage our members of the Senate to level the playing field to encourage the use of renewable energy technologies in our great state to ensure a stable and healthy economic environment for our future generations. I'll give you an example of the way energy is used. A lot of oil-producing countries today are starting to enact legislation such as net metering. They are using more solar, more renewable energy. Why should we in the United States not follow their examples? For example, one country in the Caribbean, where you originally came from, Trinidad and Tobago, it's an oil-producing country. Their economy is driven by oil. What they have done, electricity there, for their record, is just 5 cents per kilowatt. In the US, it varies anywhere from 10 cents to 20 cents per kilowatt. What they have done is to start investing more into renewable energy. And the reason for that is, like I mentioned earlier, oil is becoming less efficient. The deeper we have to drill for oil, the less efficient oil because. I encourage everyone here today to please speak to our representatives in the Senate and please encourage them to have this bill passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Our next speaker will be Richard Zenley, a retired lawyer and who before becoming a lawyer taught the history of Christianity and also a homeowner in Poplarville, Mississippi.
Thank you and good afternoon. Already you know that by my accent, I am a Yankee, born in New York, worked in Chicago as a lawyer. We moved down here 12 years ago, tired of the cold winters up north, and we're starting to get tired of the cold winters down south, but that's neither here nor there. In any event, around about 2004, we made our first step into really seriously conserving energy using the right kind of energy by buying a Prius. We are waiting for the new Audi that's supposedly going to get with all electricity 375 miles at 55 miles an hour with a 6-minute recharge. We'll wait for that. Katrina hit us pretty hard. Katrina went right over our house. We sat there watching us get hit. Roof blown off in large part and so on. Well, we were without electricity. We finally gave up and went up north to stay with our daughter for a while. We decided that wasn't going to happen again. And my wife said, well, look, I've been reading that some people survive up in Alabama because they had solar energy. So we decided to put in solar panels. Working through a company called GAIAN, G-A-I-A-N, for real goods is another name they have. We purchased 28 panels. Then we tried to find somebody who would put them in for us. That was not easy. We thought maybe our electrician could do it, but he never came around to it. We found out there was one man, believe it or not, one man in Mississippi who had done this work. There had been a pilot project with 3 solar energy projects in the state of Mississippi, and a gentleman by the name of John Swanson from the metropolis of Duck Hill up near Grenada was the only person who could do this. We hired him. It's such a long distance, he actually stayed with us. He's a wonderful guy. While he did it, he suggested that we shouldn't have 28 solar panels, that the number of panels should be divisible by 3, so we have 30 solar panels. It was very interesting. One day, all of a sudden, we looked at our meter, and the meter ran backwards. Wow! So what was happening was, while we were producing electricity, if we produced more than our house was using, and I should add that we have a pool, which we run the filter, sometimes 12 hours a day, sometimes 10. That meant that we were selling more back to the grid than we were using. And so our bill went down. At one time, we were down to 6 kilowatt hours we purchased in one day, when we have a house as big as what some people are paying $300 to $500 a month for electricity. The next thing we did was we decided we would get hot water from electricity. So we put in 2 different kinds of solar panels. These have antifreeze running through them, and they run into our house and heat our hot water. Then we added 6 more panels, which have water running through them to heat our hot pool. The next thing we decided we'd like to get even more electricity produced. So the question was, what do we do? Do we add another 15 solar panels? Or do we maybe try a wind turbine? Now the problem with adding more panels was that we were possibly going to produce more direct current electricity than our system could convert to there are days when there's no sun, there's lots of wind, we put in a wind turbine. Since that time, we've done other things. We redid our weather. We put in an insulation in our attic, bought a new fridge, and all the things you're supposed to do, including hanging our clothes out on the line. I don't do that, but my wife does. Now, let me talk for a moment about the history of our meter. As I said in the beginning, the meter ran backwards when we were producing more electricity than we were using, which meant that we were being paid, in a sense, the same amount for electricity as we were paying. Well, we told the president of Coast Electric, the wonderful gentleman, and he said, that's fine. However, a year ago, the vice president of Coast Electric came to us and said, that's against our bylaws. We buy our power from, I think it's called Southern Mississippi EPA, and you can't do that. We're going to have to put in 2 meters. One meter will say how much you owe us, and the other one will say how much we may owe you. We think we'll probably pay you about half of what you pay. There's nothing I can do about that. So about a month and a half ago, in they came with but only 1 new meter, and this one didn't run backwards, and so we weren't getting paid 1 red cent for whatever electricity we were producing. Well, a complaint, they didn't change that. Well, now we've got a meter which records how much we are paid and how much we will eventually be told we will be paid. We have not yet been told how much we will be paid. With all this in mind, let's address the whole question of what Mississippi should do at this time. Now, I read all of the net metering proposals, the bills, and only one of them, one by Mr. Baker, says that there should be a 1-to-1 ratio. In other words, if you produce electricity, you should get paid what you produce. I think that's very important, and I think it's a minimum. It would make sense to pay somebody who produces electricity from solar power more than he has to pay from electricity produced by such marvelous things as dirty coal. I don't believe, by the way, in clean coal, nor do I think anybody believes in it except the people who are publicizing something or other. That would be first step. Second, Coast Electric has introduced, and I don't know how many other providers have introduced it, time of usage, so that you have peak hours and you have off-peak hours. I was told that while the rate is 10 cents a kilowatt hour, it's 6 cents for off-peak hours and 18 cents for peak hours. It's a great idea. The peak hours are from 3 in the afternoon till the evening. That's the secret. We don't use electricity in those hours, or very, very little. The electricity we use in those hours is more than offset by the solar panels, because we have sun for most of that time. So it gives me a chance to see what is the best use I can make of electricity. And it helps the provider, Coast Electric, because I tend to use less electricity and produce more during the peak hours, and that's what they're interested in. They know that they want to control the peak hours so they don't have to produce so much electricity. So, the net metering laws should also provide for time of use. However, I don't think that's enough. When I put in my solar panels, I spent well over $50,000. Was this an investment? Okay. We got to save the world no matter what it costs. At the time, the Bush administration was allowing me $2,000 on my income. When I put in the wind turbine, it was around $35,000 for reasons I wouldn't go into. But at least the Obama administration gave me 30%, which was, above $9,000 off my income tax. That's important. What Mississippi has to do is to incentivize the people to purchase purchase and set up solar panels. Now, one thing, of course, is net metering. But the initial expense is a tremendous expense for most people. We're producing solar panels, well, we will be in July, producing solar panels in the plant that's going to open in Hattiesburg, which may even be possible in Emmett. Yes, we're producing them, but now let's have somebody buy them. It makes sense for Mississippi to incentivize people to buy the solar panels they're producing. Now, how do you do that? Louisiana, that backward state to the west of us, pays 50% up front of the cost of solar panels. Moreover, in addition to that 50%, the 30% you get off your taxes, they have certain zones. And those zones, they have to be passed by district, by parish, and again, those zones will loan people the amount of money it takes to put in the solar panels at a very low rate of interest. And that's what I call incentivizing solar panels. And by the way, fellow Mississippians, let's remember that supposedly liberal state of Massachusetts, they just shut down the third largest solar panel producer in the country and ran off to China, cutting 800 jobs. And here we are, supposedly backward state, we're opening up a plant and we're hiring 1,000 people. That's wonderful. We could do a lot more. So, my point, one other point. I don't think somebody who wants to put in solar panels should have to hunt up John Swanson and Doug Hill. If you're going to have solar panels produced, you need education of people as to how to rig them up. That's another thing I think that the legislature should address itself to so that we can become an efficient